These are the Sennheiser Momentum 4s, and I actually requested to review these for one very specific reason. One of our channel sponsors is headphones.com, and I swear this is important, I promise. They are sponsoring today's video, but unrelated to that, they are a company that tailors a lot towards audiophiles. You won't see a lot of headphones that are in the consumer class at headphones.com. You won't see a lot of cheap IEMs, you won't see a lot of headphones like Beats, and they definitely have a very focused audiophile community. And when I saw that the Momentum 4s were actually on their bestsellers list, that actually got me really interested in the product to see if this is actually a diamond in the rough for active noise cancellation Bluetooth headphones. So I spent the last week living with this to see if this is actually worthy of being a bestseller for audiophiles. Let's take a look at the Momentum 4. Again, this video is sponsored by headphones.com. They've been a huge help to our channel. You can find all sorts of great deals down at the website down below, including the Momentum 4. They have really fast shipping. They have an excellent industry-leading return policy of a year, and they have a super useful chat assistant that can actually answer your questions if you have any. Again, thanks headphones.com for sponsoring this video. Some of the more basic things about this, it's Bluetooth, it's got pass-through, it's got active noise cancellation, and it's got up to what they claim is about 60 hours of battery life. The comfort right out of the box, Sennheiser just usually nails, and this is no exception to that. It's very comfortable. It's got a few haptic feedback things right out of the box that make this kind of take a little bit of getting used to because there's not as many physical buttons as some people might prefer, but some people also prefer the more clean and minimized aesthetic. There's also a phone app that can control a number of things on this, including things like your noise cancellation and things like EQ, though it's a pretty basic EQ, and they do have custom settings like pop, rock, etc. But for the review of this, I left it on neutral, and I probably wouldn't change it if I did buy this. One big complaint that I do have about the app is that when you freshly download the app, it takes forever to get through all of the menus to actually get to use the headphones. Way too many pop-ups. It needs to be way more streamlined for new customers. It's not a good experience. It made me not want to use the app. And yeah, it just needs to be streamlined a lot. Now, the quality of the pass-through is what I would consider to be okay. You get a general idea of about the direction things are coming from, and you get a general idea of about how loud it is, and a general idea of about what it sounds like, but it doesn't really have a really clear-cut, super crispy sound like even AirPods Pros do. So there's definitely way better pass-through in the market, but it works well enough. I will say that the noise cancellation though is amazing, and it does a great job of cutting out all the crap you don't want. It's actually one of the better ANC modes that I've used. I think the only two better ones that I've used than this are gonna be the Quiet Comforts and then the AirPod Maxes. But this is certainly very high up on my list for noise cancellation, which is awesome and pretty much needed because I found myself playing almost at the top 2 notches for volume on this almost all the time. It's definitely not as loud as some other headphones, so things like the active noise cancellation to bring the ambient volume way down so that the small sounds can kind of shine and you can kind of hear everything to a loud enough volume. I think it was a really good thing that the noise cancellation is really good. That way it brings the ambient volume down enough to be able to hear it, even though it's not as loud as some other Bluetooth headphones. When it comes to sound, this is about what I expected with a little bit of extra that I was hoping for, but not really anticipating I would get actually, which is a little bit of Sennheiser tonality throughout most of the sound. Tonality is kind of interesting because you can have a headphone that on a frequency response graph, which we'll take a look at, actually looks fairly similar to some other headphones in this space, but there are things that are seemingly just harder to measure, like tonality, that come across in a lot of Sennheiser's products. So the tonality similarities between a headphone like the HC600 and the Momentum 4, even though the frequency response is vastly different, it still has some crossover, and this still sounds like a Sennheiser headphone, which in my book is a great thing. I really like Sennheiser's overall tones. Now, if you look at a frequency response graph, we can see right away that this leans a little bit bass heavy, like a lot of these noise cancellation Bluetooth headphones do. It's got a little bit of an active treble response, but then it's not crazy over the top. And then there's a bit of a recession in the upper mid-range. You can see that there's a level of overall warmth to the entire headphone, which comes across pretty nicely. And I will say, as far as bass, while it looks fairly elevated on a graph, I think there are headphones that even measure less boosted for bass, but have more overall impact than this does. This doesn't have quite as much slam as some other brands do. I think that part of that is what makes this kind of sound like a Sennheiser, is a really clean bass that kind of focuses on fidelity and less on impact and slam. But some bass heads are gonna prefer a much harder hitting headphone. So for those, I would look at XM4s or AirPod Maxes. And this is one of those things where if you actually look at a frequency response graph, this and the AirPod Max bass look very similar. And in fact, you wouldn't expect to hear much difference, but I find in practicality, in an actual use case, the Maxes are a much harder hitting sounding bass overall than the Momentum 4 is. That being said, you can always use EQ to boost it if you're not getting enough, or to reduce it if you're getting too much. Now let's address this overall mid-range. You can see that it leans a little bit warm with a little bit of a dip, and this is definitely audible. It doesn't quite have the vocal cut through of an open back audiophile headphone like an HD600 does, but it does seem to carry that tonality. So Sennheiser voices still sound like Sennheiser voices, which I'm personally super pumped about. I really like their tones. Now in music that is really vocal focused, artists like Adele, The Weeknd, Bruno Mars, John Legend, anybody with a really heavy emphasis on the vocal push through in their mixing, it's gonna sound fine. And in fact, I think that the isolation of that vocalist actually works really, really well. When you listen to a lot of other genres as a whole, like anything rock, anything pop, sometimes even rap, anything that includes a lot of other instrumentation on the outer boundaries is gonna get mixed in a lot more than other headphones like the HD600 I keep comparing to. Now, when it comes to treble response, I find this to be an active area. I don't find Sennheiser as an overall brand to be as precise for treble as some planar brands like Hyphaman, for example, but I still find this to be a fairly detailed and fairly sparkly and clean sounding headphone. And in fact, I would place the overall treble response somewhere in between a 6XX and an HD600 if you're familiar with those as a reference point. It sounds pretty complete except for a roll off at the very top end. It's pretty active sounding, comes across fairly detailed, and with the active noise cancellation, you really don't feel like you're missing a lot of the small technical aspects. Now, when you're talking about sound staging, when you're comparing to like closed back wired headphones, which don't have any kind of technological advancements in them, this is maybe about on par with what the average one would be, to say basically not great, and like an open back headphone, which would be kind of overall much better. But when you're talking about the advancements of some companies with wireless headphones and their software, comparing to something like a Max that has spatial audio as a feature, the Soundstage does fall quite a bit behind what is capable on some others because of the use of technology. And this is where you do see some of the limitations of being a little bit of a smaller brand, at least compared to the big boys like Apple on some of these products like this one. Now, I'm not saying that spatial audio is a convincing audiophile sound or an accurate piece of software manipulation or anything like that. I'm just saying that it definitely does sound wider, even if it's fake. And when you're comparing the different soundstage ability, I think that there's a lot of other headphones specifically for soundstage, specifically in the Bluetooth realm, that can do it a little bit better. Whether they're cheating with software or not, that's not the point. They still do it a little bit better than this does. That being said, for audiophiles, I don't think that the Momentum 4 betrays the honesty of a recording as far as soundstaging goes. It's still a wide enough soundstage to do things like gaming, and watching movies, and even listening to some music, especially if they're helping you out with the mixing to be a really wide soundstaging track. You can get a decent amount out of this. So the answer to the question that I had in the beginning, does this deserve to be on the bestsellers list? I would say that if you're looking for a wireless headphone that sounds familiar and sounds like that kind of Sennheiser-y sound, this is actually the best closed back Sennheiser I think I've listened to. I actually prefer this over the HD620S, and I definitely prefer it over the monstrosity, the HD820. Just kind of my personal opinion. Now, I think like most people, I would still pick their open backs any day of the week. HD600 is gonna be my jam, but I think that staying within the Sennheiser family, this is actually a really great buy. I don't know that everybody's going to appreciate the Sennheiser tonality though. In fact, I know a lot of people like it and I know a lot of people don't like it. This is a fairly decent closed back headphone that actually sounds good, not just okay, it sounds good in a field of really poor performing, bad sounding Bluetooth headphones. But I think I can definitely give this 2 thumbs up if you're looking for this type of tuning and this type of tonality from a closed back wireless headphone. Thanks a lot for watching. Thank you Headphones for sponsoring this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.